Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining me today is Marcy Sagel. She is the founder and the principal of MSA Interiors, a leading commercial interior design firm that specializes in multifamily housing, student housing, senior living, and affordable housing, as well as other complex commercial projects. She has over 30 years of experience, and we're going to talk about today multifamily living, what it is, some of the special considerations that go into it, and how everybody deserves to have beautiful design from affordable housing all the way up to the highest of market rate housing. So I hope there is something that you can take away and enjoy out of the conversation. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hi, Marcy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a conversation with you. It's interesting. Some of the work that you do it's a different aspect of design than maybe what we hear about quite often. You know, we hear a lot about residential, and then even with commercial, we hear about it, but not as much, multifamily or some of the different aspects of the commercial design that you and your team do. And so I'm really excited to get into that conversation today. But Marcy, so that our listeners can learn more about you, share a little bit of your journey in design, kind of where you started and how you ended up doing what you do today.
Well, I have been in love with design since I was little. I would watch my mother design our home and homes and, really got involved in it from a young age. And when she worked with interior designers, I would be involved in some of the process. And I just grew a passion for it from a very young age. And so I say it's really it's a hobby and it's a passion and all of those things wrapped into one.
Did you start with this more affordable housing commercial space or more residential and then move into that later? How did you get into that particular part of design?
Great question. I would say that there's a couple parts to that. So first, I was asked to do a project by someone I grew up with that was having a difficult time with their interior designer. And I had known him basically since ninth grade. He was building a big house on the water. And he said, I just don't feel that he is speaking he's not at my taste level, and he's not speaking the language that I want. He's not meeting deadlines. Do you think you could take this over and kind of take it and run with the architect? And I said, absolutely. So I worked with the builder, a top builder actually in the area. It's the top builder. And they were up and coming and they were incredibly professional. And we worked with the architect, who again was very, very, established in the Annapolis area. And we worked on getting this house built, which won a lot of awards. And it kind of kicked me off into knowing that I could have my own company, which I didn't know prior to that. So I got a lot of work after that, both commercial and residential.
Who were you working for when you got the job initially, Marcy?
So I had a completely different field of interest.
Okay.
I had like doing branding and graphic design, art direction, that kind of thing. Very creative still, but just in a different, realm of the creative industry.
Sure.
So what I decided was I didn't, as much as I love residential interior design, I really felt that my passions were really towards commercial design. I wanted to work in that area. I wanted to see buildings look more beautiful, more sort of like the residential feel that you give a home. I wanted larger buildings to feel that way. And so early on, we started taking our clients, and I guess I should also say I had a lot of experience with cabinetry. So I had an architect, he was actually head of a big multifamily company who I met because of cabinetry. He asked for my opinion and asked me to redline all of his drawings for this very, very large multifamily building. So I redlined everything, came back to him with some questions, and basically said, why would you spend this amount of money on cabinetry for a multifamily rental building? If we do this, this, and this, we can cut the pricing down. We can make it look as good. It'll be a lot more durable and it will have a longer shelf life. So he loved that. And he decided to give me the design of the whole building. And that's how I got started. And he said, I said, well, wait a second. I don't know how to do multifamily. And he said, I'm going to work with you every step of the way. I'm going to mentor you and I'm going to teach you about multifamily. And I said, okay. And so he's really was instrumental in me getting into the multifamily industry. And
Wow.
with that guidance, I feel like he kind of taught me everything I needed to know to get started in it. And then, of course, years later, many, many years later, I'm still doing that and really loving it. So,
Well, that is really like a huge project right off the bat. That's kind of the dream project that many people have to work years for. Not saying you didn't put in the time and effort, but what a gosh, just a blessing to get that along with somebody who's willing to teach you and mentor you in that particular space, right? And I love how you mentioned art direction. A lot of that is very, very similar. I have coached people in art direction and illustration and a lot of other of those types of aspects. And it is that project building and the layering and the piece by piece. And so I can see how there's a lot of translation of skill set from one space to the other. For those that might not be familiar, how would you define multifamily housing or multifamily buildings?
so we do a lot of different aspects of multifamily. We were in the same area of multifamily, which was just market rate for quite some time. And then we had a developer ask us to do affordable housing, one of the very first renovations of a very large scale project. And so we do market rate multifamily, which is a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of apartment buildings. We do affordable housing. We do student housing. We do senior living housing. And I think that pretty much covers the gambit for multifamily. So with multifamily, it could be large scale apartments with a clubhouse, which is what I would call more of a suburban or garage style multifamily. And then within the cities or more of an urban development, we're looking at larger high rises, towers, lots of apartments, big amenity spaces sprinkled throughout the entire building. We have roof decks, we have pools, we have outdoor parks and walking areas. There's so many different aspects to multifamily, but we do them all. And so we have had now many, many, many years of experience doing multifamily, and every single one of them to me is equally important.
I love that because if you think about it, multifamily can be, I'm going to call it affordable and more inexpensive, all the way up to, as the kids would say, bougie, right? Really expensive, high-rise living, that type of thing. And I love that with a company that does it all, or at least my perception is that if you do it all, certainly there are ways to value engineer it, but it's the same mindset that whether you're able to afford X amount or XXX amount, you still deserve to live in a way with dignity, with things that are going to last, with things that have, like you said, a longer shelf life. You may have some differences in some of the selections and some of the things like that, but there is an understanding that there is value regardless of the price range. Now, the value may shift a bit here and there, but there's still value. And so I really appreciate that versus perhaps the view of we only work on the high rise bougie stuff. We don't do the other, almost as if you're looking down on it. as opposed to saying, we believe everybody deserves to have a place to live that they can afford within their means. And so, what does that look
And
like?
my favorite line is everyone deserves great design.
I love that.
So with that line, I say, remember when senior living used to be looking like a hospital, like you'd go to
Yes,
a nursing home and it looked like you were in a hospital prison. I mean, literally, it was just really bad.
it's
Everything
bad.
was turquoise and, pale colors and just not good looking design. And
Yeah.
now you walk into a senior living community and it feels like you're home. So
Yes.
it's beautiful. And that's pretty much how we look at every project.
And the common spaces feel comfortable and like you want to be there instead of sterile and gross and unkempt and like you're ready to get out of it. So big difference I've noticed.
It is a big difference. And, like I said, every single project, you get a budget, you work within your budget, you make it look great for whatever budget it is that you're
That's
working
right.
with. And basically, materials cost the same amount of money across the board, whether it's affordable or market rate. You have to know how to work with materials and the latest materials that are on the market so that you know how to bring the cost down when you need to. And you can still make it look high level. And I think the biggest key factor is the longevity of a project. So
Yes.
you want it to look fresh for as long as it possibly can. So you don't want to work with just odd colors or the color of the moment. You really want it to be sort of like something that can last the test of time.
I'm thinking classic design in some ways, right? Classic colors, things are going to hold value, which actually brings me to my next question for you is, we see a lot of homes, especially if you're on online, Instagram, TikTok, all that. Everybody's gone through the farmhouse look, and then they went through the gray house look, and then they've gone through the everything's so neutral and layered look, and then now they're back into colors and avocado green and all the browns, and brown furniture was out, now brown furniture's back. So we see a lot more trends, I would say, in single family living because we're only having to please the one, right? We're only having to have the value discussion for the owners of the home. We're only having to have the beauty conversation. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder for the person living in the house. But in multifamily living, there are a lot of people, a lot of players, not just homeowners, but a lot of investors and players because it is owned by a collective, a cooperative, a corporation, something that's bigger than any one person in most cases. And so, with that, there are a lot of players that come to the table. I know I've coached a few designers that when they get into some of these big build outs like this, there are so many people with, a piece of the puzzle or a stake in the whole thing showing up, stakeholders showing up at these meetings. It's not like going, how we're always like, if you go to the wife, make sure the husband's there. Who are the decision makers? But you're walking into a room with a lot of decision makers. And so what does that look like to balance like the arbiter of what is beautiful, what is valuable, what is quality, what is longevity? How is that managed among so many stakeholders?
So it's something that we've learned how to craft over the years. And I say that because I have taught as a guest speaker a number of masters in real estate development programs like Johns Hopkins, I think Georgetown. I've done a few of them in the area of the Maryland, DC area. And basically, you have a lot of developers or people that are working for developers that are in that program that really have never selected anything before. But that is exactly your audience. You're going to be presenting to that exact audience.
That's
so
right.
what I try to do is I put together these little exercises to teach them about how to make the selections. And it isn't about what you like personally. So what we do is and the class, this is pretty much what I do as a guest lecturer. I pretty much put this package together and I break the room up into like 3 or 4 different groups, depending on how many people are in the class that night. And I break it up and I give them a whole package of materials to look at. So it would be, here's your address and location. Here's how many units we're going to do. Here's how many square feet we're going to do. And here are all your competitors and what their amenities are listed as. Here's what the amenities look like. Here's what their units look like. And we sort of do a presentation page of all of the, competition. And then we start showing them different visuals of inspirations. So this look, we might do 3 different looks with maybe 6 to 10 different pictures on each of those pages so that they're choosing for that particular look. And we can really gauge as the group starts to narrow down their look based upon coming up with a different look than your competitors have and still picking something as a group collectively together and owning the decision that you're making. Now, of course, I really don't have this happen, but if it did happen, we would really kind of narrow it down as we were going through the design process to have them go in the direction that we feel is definitely the direction they need to go in. So when we're picking those inspirations, we're helping to make those decisions together collectively. And
I love
it's
that
very
though too,
helpful.
Marcy. Yeah, because if you were to show them, let's say, a lot of individual items, it's easy to say yes or no, I like it or I don't like it. But when you're showing the collection of all of these, you've already made the decision that all of these things go together well, right? So you've eliminated a large portion of mismatch of things. And then it's more about what is the look? What does the competitor have? How do we want to expand this out? And then you can certainly get into the more minute detail, but that's brilliant to be able to show them. You're really showing them like the concept board all at one time and working through the concept versus working through the pieces.
And when I teach the class as a guest lecturer, I basically say, okay, each of you go off and I want you to circle the ones that you like. And I want you to list maybe 1 or 2 reasons why you like those because it gives us insight as we go forward. And then we might do a page on lighting. We would do a page on the club room, a page on the fitness area, a page in the lobby, units. And everyone collectively picks those and they've made their choices. They've really narrowed it down to the point where we can then make the next step really about the elevations, about the furniture layouts, about the elevations of, any of the millwork and any of the built-ins that we're doing, and really start to craft the whole space. We spend a lot of time on space planning, and we'll take the entire file from the architect, and we work in Revit. So we'll take the whole file, we'll take it and we'll ask the management group. We always have the management group put in their 2 cents about what they want. So let's say we're working with a big management group like a Greystar. Greystar will have a list for us in that location of what their amenities need to be and the average square footage they need to be, because they've been doing it a long time. They're one of the biggest, management groups out there. So they're telling us upfront, we need 2 offices, 2 closed offices, 2 landing spots with laptops. We need a back of house kitchen. We need a back of house locked area. And they're going to tell us all of these things because they're so experienced. But if we're dealing with a management group that doesn't, maybe have as much experience or not quite sure, we get a list from them up front of what they're looking for. So we don't have to come back and reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. We can then space plan knowing exactly what they may or may not want. Now, we add a lot of creative things to that as we're moving through the process. So we might come up with a lot of fun ideas that we'll showcase while we're presenting inspirations. Maybe there's a golf simulator. Maybe there's, what we call a crafts room or an arts room where people can actually do painting. They can have someone come in and do sort of a craft night, a holiday thing, all of those things, whether the kitchen is going to be a working kitchen or just a warming kitchen. And, we call it a presentation kitchen, depending on where it is. If we're doing, affordable, we would meet with the community directors and we would talk to them and really figure out what does the community need? What kind of services do they need? Do they need meal delivery? Do they need daycare? Do they need senior services? Because a lot of aging in place happens in affordable housing. So you're really taking a look at a broader spectrum of the amenities. And if you get the community manager or some people living in the area that are going to be possibly moving in, we get them involved in the process. They feel really connected, and we're actually turning out a community that is more valuable for the people that are going to be living in it.
The consensus that you get to early on really does help with the whole process and that buy-in, right? Because this is going to be expensive and it's really hard. I mean, not that you can't go back and say, I don't like something or that's not going to work. But when you had a hand in saying yes and developing it, you're a lot less likely to point fingers and poke holes in something because you were part of that initial process. So,
That's right. And when you talked about having too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak,
yeah,
so many people sitting at a table sometimes, and everyone wants to have a say. This collectively helps people to make decisions together. So we send them the presentation to everyone that's in the room. Afterwards, they send us back a collective list of which ones they want to move forward with. So they've already had a meeting separately from us. So they're collectively putting those thoughts together, and one point person is our contact. And we always do that. And we make sure that that point person has collectively gotten everybody's decisions and sent that back to us. And
right.
it helps us to move forward and grow with that group. And I feel exactly what you said. There's better buy-in. Everybody feels like they are the decision makers and not one over the other, but collectively.
Right. And if their voice didn't get heard, then that's up to them and the group prior to it ever coming to you. So by the time it comes to you, not that those things don't rear their head sometimes, but by and large, by the time it's come to you, it is worked through that internal process and worked up through a funnel to the person that has been kind of tasked with being the go-between and the communication source. So then it reduces the 45 emails from the 45 people who all have 45 to 90 ideas on what should happen. That all kind of happens collectively. I'm interested. I'd like to hear a little more, Marcy, on the community input and how that influences some of the affordable homes. I think that is key is understanding what the because affordable housing or any housing in any area is not just about the house, right? It's about the community presence because the minute it has a multitude of families living in it, there is a community present. It's kind of like in a subdivision. I don't currently live, well, I kind of live in one, but the house we were just in had a subdivision. We had the subdivision pool and the subdivision tennis courts, and we all got to decide if we were going to turn some into pickleball courts. And then we had the playground for all the kids in the neighborhood. And like we had these amenities that were community based. And so when you're building these multifamily housing, that community feel is almost baked and cooked in. It is into whatever it is, the structure that you're building or into the surrounding grounds. So what does it look like? Not only to get community feedback, but then to balance community interest and desires with the management company's needs and desires. And how does the designer fit in the middle of kind of the arbitration of that?
It's important for us to sit at a table with the community leaders and people that are going to be moving into that community of affordable housing. So that looks like sitting down with a liaison from the development group, a liaison from, the new manager, the person who's going to manage the property and their team, so that they're involved in hearing exactly what the community wants. And that management team at the same time can speak up and say, well, we need certain things. There's certain things that we need to run the property, in an effective way. And then they have, the community activists sometimes, or the community speakers, or the people that are really involved in being the voice of the community. And so all of those are a lot of voices. So it's best to have one meeting where everyone's together, and especially at the initial stage, so everyone can be heard, and making sure that those voices get presented in the design as it moves through the process.
And what are some of the financial barriers that you know that could kind of play into that? You know, we want to create this beautiful, wonderful, affordable housing, but there are constraints. I mean, behind the whole idea of affordable housing, right? It's not like there's free flowing money all over the place for that. What are those financial barriers outside of maybe what we would think
They
of as
vary
money?
from location to location, state to state, and we work a lot of states. So we certainly know that zoning, you have zoning, you have permitting, you have politics involved,
Yeah.
you have,
Yeah.
tax, all the tax implications that you can get, tax deductions and things of that nature. It's typically a partnership between development and a city, so to speak. So you have private public partnerships, a lot of them going on. And so they work differently in each area. We try not to get involved in the political aspects
Sure.
or the policy aspects of anything. What we do, and we do work with some of the biggest affordable housing developers out there. We work with them on properties all over the place. We are involved from a different level. So we don't act, we're not activists. We're not out there seeking policy or money or any of that thing. We are strictly designing the projects for the groups that are hiring us. And they all look different. So we have family REITs, we have, public companies that are funded publicly. We have private companies that are family owned or, have a conglomeration of developers that decide that they're going into that segment of the market. And they may take two of them may join together, or two or three of them may join together. Someone has the land. Someone else says, okay, well, you have the land, so we'll develop the property and we'll do it together as partners. That happens all the time. So we're brought in so many different levels of the project that we try to stay out of that area and really focus in on just what we do and really support our clients as well as we can in all of those areas to help them get the best project possible.
So when you're building multifamily housing that is, let's say, on the higher end of things, right? So it's, I think you call that market rate driven, like very much what people can afford to pay. Um, I can imagine that the idea of beauty and design is almost automatically baked in. There's some amount of expectation for good design and beautiful things and quality and value just because it is going to be driven by the market. It's not going to be held at an affordable market rate. It's going to be supply and demand driven, right? How hard is it to fight for that same beauty and design when you're in an affordable housing market? Because I can see that in some areas it could be, I'm trying to be careful how I say it. It could be very easy for some to look at that and go, let's just get by with it. Like you said earlier, everybody deserves beautiful design. It doesn't mean that's got to cost a ton, right? It's thoughtful design. It's caring about the selections of things we get in. But I could see and know that there are some that are looking to get out as cheaply as possible because it is affordable versus making it affordable from other grants and incentives in other ways, but being able to really be thoughtful in the design so that at whatever level we're playing, how much is there a fight or a an understanding of how to put that in? I can see that being a rub.
So certainly the materials have to be incredibly durable for affordable housing. Okay. They have to be incredibly durable for senior living. Okay. So we do hospital work as well. But and in that same category, they have to be very durable. And the materials are certain materials that we have to be using. And so I wouldn't say that just because it's affordable, it would be cheaper.
Right.
And I would say that, like for instance, in Virginia, they have Virginia Housing Authority, they have, VHA, they have their own laws and rules that they have to follow. And maybe 20 years ago, I remember one of the big developers said to me, I spend more money on my affordable cabinets than I do on a market rate. Okay. So if that gives you any indication, it was because the guidelines were so strict and they were so high level that they didn't really change with the times. Okay. So why market rate were all private and they weren't under as strict a jurisdiction, they were more expensive to build affordable in Virginia than it was to build market rate. The cabinetry for sure. And that's a big part of the budget for the units. So as far as the units go now, we can make things look pretty fantastic for little bits of money in the units. We can have tile that is absolutely stunning and beautiful. We can do beautiful quartz tops. We can have painted cabinetry. We can have wood cabinetry. We can have the same level of looks in affordable and in market rate. The differences are little nuances. Like, for instance, if we have a lot of aging in place or more senior level audience, you have to think about the way that the units are laid out. You want the bathrooms close to the bedrooms, okay? And I know that sounds silly, but in some apartments, you have to walk through a closet to get through to a bathroom. And that's not really as effective for a senior person, getting up in the middle of the night and they need like a straight path to the bathroom. And, just little nuances of different changes in the design elements that we do. If you have, one bathroom and it's being used as your guest bathroom with one door and then another one to the bedroom, that's reasonable. It's functional. It works, but then you have the cost of the extra door. So you have to kind of look and gauge all these little things when you're looking at it. So the architects typically do the layouts of the units now. And what we do is we go back, and no matter who the architecture firm is, we always redline the units to look at how the layout might be more effective if we moved a wall or changed an opening, or sometimes they get pretty awkward, and not every architectural firm is great at understanding furniture layouts, and that you really want to maximize where your seating is in the living room, and you need a big wall for a console and a TV and all of these things that you have to be thinking through, and maybe just a smaller table as your dining table, even if you have an island, like a movable island, or an L-shaped kitchen, depending on what we're doing. You have to just kind of look at all of that. And I think sometimes people don't understand that you have to have a hallway that's big enough to bring a whole sofa down. You don't certainly want to have a mover come to a brand new apartment and find out you can't get your sofa through the hallway into the living room. So, just little small adjustments that we see that other people don't necessarily see because we've been doing it for so long. And it really does help with the final product because ultimately people are renting the units. So the units are really important. The jazz is in all of the amenity spaces and the ease of walking to get to your unit, making sure that that's not, cumbersome. So when you get into some of these larger buildings that are 500-600 plus units, you really have to be thoughtful about where you put the mail and how long it is to get to, how many elevator banks versus where your apartment may be located to the parking area. So you have to kind of think through a lot of little details that aren't necessarily typical for an interior design firm. But we do all of that because we have been doing this for a really long time.
Well, we've heard a lot, even on the residential side, just about aging in place, age in place, and being able, you can get certified to do aging in place. This is like aging in place on steroids because, again, it's understanding not everybody ages in place the same way, right? There may be some that are, you have the capacity to use a walker. Some are just pure age, not about any kind of aid, if you will, wheelchair or walker or anything else. But still, you might need a bar to help you get up from a toilet or get out of a shower, extra hand places to hold and things to do, room to move, even room to have a person come with you to help you transfer in and out of spaces. And it's easy to not think of that and to think of, I'm going to say, a single person experience versus an aided experience.
I was just going to say, I have a nephew that was injured in April, 22 years old at the time of the accident, and came out of, a coma, intensive care, learning how to walk, talk,
Sure.
everything all over again. We're 6 months out and he's doing amazing. But when they toss you after you're out of shock trauma, so to speak, and the coma, they send you to a rehabilitation
Yep.
facility. And so he was there for a while. And then you get like 4 days notice and they toss you out basically to do outpatient. So I quickly had to find him an apartment, okay, where we were going to have full care because he needed full care. And he has a sister. So I found an apartment literally a mile from here. Great building. And it has like 600 units. So when I went to go look for the apartment, which we really didn't have a lot of time to do, I wanted to find one that was close to the front of the building so that when he was picked up, we wouldn't have far to take him. And that once he was hopefully going to be able to walk again, which he is now, he's walking with a walker, he wouldn't have far to walk to get to the elevator. And I wanted it to have a fitness area. I wanted it to have a pool, all of the things that he could be wheeled in the wheelchair to do when he first came out.
Sure.
All of those things, they adapted the apartment for me. They gave me the name of a contractor that comes out, puts the bars in, puts the seats in. We ordered everything else, and they adapted the entire apartment for us. So it was really remarkable. And we design apartments all the time, and I'm very familiar with what to look for. I don't know that a lot of other people would have known to look for some of the things that I did, um,
Right.
but they were incredible to work with, and they got it taken care of very, very quickly. And he's still living there right now. I mean, and it's just been lovely that he is there, and they've been so good to him.
So, but in college, I worked at a company, it was called Rebound at the time, and it was inpatient um, living for those that had brain injuries.
That's
And
he has a level 3 brain injury. So
yep,
yes, I am definitely aware of
exactly.
what
And
that's
that's
like.
where I worked for the summer. And I sat and typed up all the case studies and from the occupational therapist to the physical therapist to the, all the therapists, music therapists, the art therapist, all the people coming in and out. And I typed up all the case notes and everything. That was back in the day when you had to listen to the dictator and type it all.
Yeah.
We're talking back in the 80s. But I worked with those patients and then with the caregiver. So I saw that it took space. That's the thing that we don't sometimes think about when we're able-bodied. We don't think about the extra space that it takes for that other person to assist you and to move you. And so there's a lot more when you're building in that capacity for somebody to truly age in place. Just even the minimals of wider door openings, higher toilets instead of so low, just even some of the small things, but even more so when you're trying to plan an entire building to allow for that, and in the community spaces and in the open spaces of getting down a hallway or whatever. So
Well, it's
um,
as easy as the fob. So fobs are high up in
yes,
all market rate buildings. They're up here. And if you're in a wheelchair, they're not always put in the right location. So if you're in a wheelchair or a walker, you're not, you don't want to have somebody help you every time you want to get in a space.
that's right.
So I think it's been wonderful, and the experience for me, has been a beautiful experience because not only do we design these buildings all the time, but now I knew how seniors needed it to be, but handicapped, real handicapped, where you cannot get yourself out of a chair without
Yes,
assistance. You need help eating, all of those things initially when he came home. That's what he needed. And of course, now he's feeding himself, he's walking on the walker, everything's doing great. But when you go through, the course of an accident, you have all of these transitions that you have to make in your lifestyle. And
That's right.
so an apartment building is almost your only way you can do it because of the elevator. So I have 4 levels in my house. My brother has 3 levels in his house. You know, either we were going to have to move or we were going to move Sam in with his sister in an apartment building and care. So we had round the clock care initially, and now we've kind of weaned off of a lot of that, and now we just have it part of the day. But yeah, it's been a really great learning exercise for me because I've been involved in the process with him the whole time. So it's been great. And you've worked in a facility, so the needs are great.
They really are. And we had young people. We had a young man who was in high school with my sister, and they'd swerved to miss a dog and had an accident. And so we saw people from young people in high school all the way up to aged people. So it, like you said with your nephew, we can all have anything that happens at any point in time. And that brings up a good point and question. Like, what role does dignity play in the relationship between housing design and then the well-being of the resident, whether it's this is the way I'm going to have to live out the rest of my life, or this is temporary, like your nephew, in my recovery and in my rehab. Because let's be honest, the surroundings that we live in impact how we feel, and that impacts the way that we see life, whether it brings us joy or whether it makes us feel more depressed. Like the area that we lived in and how difficult it is to move in our environment really plays a role in that.
It's ultimately what's most important. We all come home and we live in a space that we choose, and not everyone gets to choose their exact space. So that's something to keep in mind. My nephew did not get to choose where he lived. We had to choose for him. So we want to make it as comfortable as we possibly can, as agile as it can be, the movability and everything that goes with it. And the dignity that people have and where they live is the most important thing. You want to feel like you have the ability to have the best environment for whatever stage of life you're in, whatever that is, whether it's temporary or a permanent situation. You want to make sure that you can make it the most that it can be. And so when you have buildings that are very adjustable, so to speak, and they can kind of move with you, and help you make some of those changes in your units, and build it out so that it's easy to get around, and everyone in the building that's management kind of knows what's going on. Like we went to management and had a big conversation about it, and they could not have been kinder, more efficient, they were just incredibly helpful. So the dignity that they give my nephew and many other people in the building, I might add, because we're located near Johns Hopkins, this particular building. It's downtown. And so they have a lot of people that come there for major surgeries from all over the world that live in that apartment building, that are there for a period of time, while they're either getting treatment, surgeries, or getting better. And so they've really learned to adapt, and they've made it part of their philosophy of managing their building. So it's been pretty remarkable.
It really is. So I have a question. If designers are listening to this, and two things. One, maybe they're thinking, this is something that I'm interested in. I love residential or commercial, but I'd really be interested in looking at this aspect of either multifamily living or even just the adaptability of some of these spaces. Where should their next step be? What should they look at? Are there any resources available to them that you can?
So commercial design is it's very different, as you said, from residential design, and there are a lot of stricter guidelines. From everything that we do it has code that we work to.
Mhm.
So if you are interested in commercial design, I would recommend that, if you are already a designer and you're interested in commercial design, I would recommend looking into some of the programs that you can take for certification of aging in place or any of the, there's so many different certifications that you can get now. My goodness, my whole design team, everybody has like a million different types of certification. But I think it's important to learn how to understand the whole community that you're building for, and not just what that person's like at that moment. So even if you're doing residential, if you're doing a home and you're looking at the bathrooms, you want to make sure that you have some showers that are walk-inable, that can be adapted to someone having an injury or an accident. And typically, like on a first floor of a house, you want to make sure that you have a bedroom with a bathroom so that you don't have to have an elevator. Someone doesn't have to, not live in their own home if there's some kind of a accident or injury or illness that prevents them from going upstairs. So just really looking at something in a different way and learning how to adapt it and think about it more holistically and longer term. So, for instance, everyone grows up in a house. A lot of people grow up in a house, and that house, your parents may age in that house. Okay. And how is that going to change from when you grew up in it to later in life? How can they continue to live in that home and have it work for them at an older age? So just sort of things you can think about and learn about and try to figure out how that, and I say, just look at your own home you grew up in and see how that could potentially become adaptable. Just different things of that nature. Just start thinking in a different, stream of thought. So,
Yeah. And with regards to beauty, being available from affordable housing all the way up to the most expensive of, penthouse communities, what is it that you wish either architects knew, builders knew, other designers knew about the accessibility of good design and beauty at the affordable level?
the biggest thing is to understand materials that you're going to work with. And when you understand the cost of materials and keeping up with all the latest things that are out on the market and understanding what they are, it really helps you to make a decision when you're designing a project, whether it is the highest end or whether it's the lowest end. It really doesn't make a difference. If you're knowledgeable in product pricing when you're presenting, then you're not going to have to waste your time to value engineer every single thing that you picked out, because construction prices are super high right now. Materials are high right now. Mm-hmm. So when you're presenting and the developer turns to you and says, well, I love this, but how much is it? And you don't know, it's very hard for them to make a decision on the spot. If you're presenting 3 or 4 different, units tile, you say this one is $1.50 and this one is $4.75. Well, you times that by however many bathrooms you have in the entire building, and it gets pretty high. So it's important to understand cost and what those cost of materials
scale, right? We're not
absolutely.
That's right.
So, but even in any project, you can. I always say working with the highest end materials is actually the easiest thing you can do. Working with materials that look like they're high end, that are less cost and more cost effective, it's really a much more difficult thing to do. That's why it's so important to understand the cost of all materials out there on the marketplace and to really keep up with them. Let vendors come in, let them educate you on why their product's great, and get a list of where their projects are around the country and how many years they've had that product installed. And then what I sometimes do is I call the manager of that particular building and ask them to tell me, have you had any issues with this material before? I don't want to spec anything that's ever had a problem. I want to make sure it's not going to have a problem on my client. So it's really important, even when you design a building, a year later, call and speak to the head of maintenance and find out what they like and don't like about the building that you just designed, so that you can understand what not to do in the future.
Oh, I love that.
Feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. So, Marcy, if people want to follow you and want to see what you're doing or learn more, where are you hanging out online?
So we are, it's MSAinteriors.com. You can go online and you can send us an email through that website. We are just, believe it or not, we never really did social media or marketing before, just starting. I know that sounds crazy, been in business for a very long time, but going to be launching a new product to teach people how to be commercial designers. So
Oh, I
there'll
love
be
it.
learning modules, and that will be coming out February 1. And so we'll have all of that on our website, on MSA's website, and you can learn more about it there. But it's called Designer Bank, and it will be coming out February 1. So,
That sounds awesome. Well, Marcy, thank you so much for sharing with us, inviting us just to think about commercial design maybe a little differently than what we had in the past, understanding that everybody deserves beauty and that we can, if we want to engineer it, we can certainly engineer that in, right? With the
absolutely.
selections that we make and then getting consensus and working with the group and finding ways to build community within the community that we're actually the building that we're constructing. So I really appreciate the thought process around that and your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your time and just getting to know us here at MSA.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Marcy, thank you so much for joining us today here at Profit is a Choice. You know, I love that we can choose to not only be profitable, but choose to put beauty in the things that we're creating, whether it is for a community-based space like we talked about today, or whether it's for an individual homeowner. Both in both cases, everybody deserves to have just beautiful and thoughtful design. And so thank you for just inviting us into understanding what makes spaces compelling. What I would like to invite you all to do as you're listening is certainly check out the resources that Marcy has for you, but also think about your own systems and processes, whether you're working in commercial or whether you're working in residential. You know, do you have thoughtful processes that support your own profitability, that support your strategy, that support where you're going? You can check out our Strategy to Go or our CFO to Go programs. You can learn more by going to scarletthreadconsulting.com. Go to the Work With Me page, and you can find all the ways that we support you in building that strong backbone of business so that you can support those that you do in a beautiful way of design. And so come back, join us on all of the podcasts, listen in, let us know if there's something that you want to hear about that we haven't covered. We're always open to that. We would love for you to leave us a review. We haven't asked for those in a very long time, but they always help our podcast be found. And so whatever listening platform you're on, leave us a 5-star review and tell others what you love about Profit is Choice. And remember, choose to be profitable because profit doesn't happen by accident. Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.